These microphones are in, our faces are up.
Microphones.
Oh, closed captioning is now on
Oh yeah.
because I almost forgot to do that.
Oh yeah. Move my microphone closer.
Have to send a message really quick. Okay. All right. Okay,
Okay.
we're in. We're
Yes.
hot. We're
We're
live.
we're live. We are recording a podcast. Is what we're doing.
Again, on the new bi weekly, which is actually just the old bi weekly schedule.
Right.
Completely unintentional, but happening.
It is happening.
It's
It'll be all
happening.
right though.
It's cool. It's fine.
Worst
Everything is
things have
awesome.
happened. Yeah.
Way worse things have happened. Like the
Because we're
Titans just
making
scored.
podcasts. Oh, well, I mean it was a field goal.
No, they got a touchdown too.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
That's lame.
Yeah, it's lame. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about because this is not a sports broadcast.
It's not. It's not.
This
Mostly.
is about what's going on in our world today.
Mm-hmm.
Hooray.
Huzzah.
Huzzah. So why don't we get down to it really quick? Welcome to Fireside Breakdowns. I'm John.
And I'm Robin.
On this show, we break down some of the most controversial, complex, and even polarizing topics facing our society. We use honest, good faith analysis backed by research to form our conclusions. We promise to skew our bias towards what can be factually supported and to make it clear when we're giving you our opinion versus speaking about something we've actually researched.
Yeah, we're human. We have blind spots and personal biases, and they will show up sometimes. But the goal of this show isn't to convince you to see things our way. We want to give everyone a foundational understanding of these complicated topics and present the most truthful information available so that we can discuss and address these issues in a thoughtful and beneficial way.
We talk about some pretty heavy stuff on this show, and we tackle topics that might feel polarizing. It's only because they are. But we do that because we have an important goal in mind. We want to change the way people have hard conversations. And we think we can do that using research and discussion to create common understanding. And since you're here, we hope you want the same thing.
So, we suggest getting comfortable, maybe having a good drink on hand and a football cup as we work through this stuff. Welcome to our fireside.
It is definitely football night, so we will be marginally distracted. For those of you watching this on YouTube, you might hear or see random outbursts as the Chiefs score and then probably trail by the half and then come back in the fourth quarter to win
Yeah.
against the Titans.
Yeah, maybe come back end of the third and then keep us all biting our fingernails, wondering if they're going to hold on to the lead through the fourth. Sometimes they do that. Makes things really
Definitely.
exciting.
Yeah. If that's what happens, they'll try to keep it within like a 2-point game. That's how that's going
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah, they just want us to stay young
Yeah, that's it.
over here.
This is why I moisturize, not so that I can fight the effects of riding motorcycles and being outside a lot. No, it's so that I can watch Chiefs games and maintain my youthful appearance without aging 73 years every game. I would look like
Yeah,
the
see,
stinking crypt keeper.
I'm just excited that they're contributing to my goal of actually having some of my gray hairs show on the outside of my hair. I'm really working toward that. It's a goal of mine. And every Chiefs game that I watch, I feel like I get a few
Get
more
just a little
of
closer.
them. So
Yeah,
just a little
yeah,
closer.
for sure. Again, not a sports show that we're running here, although we'd love to
No.
talk about it. If our latest content has been keeping you on the edge of your seats because of its incredibly well crafted and scripted, prose, then I have disappointing news for you all. This one is completely unscripted. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're winging this one,
We're-
guys, because life
yeah,
has decided we are not going to have time to fully script some stuff right now. So it was either
that's
record
okay.
something or don't. And we
The
wanted to
good
record
news
something.
is we're real good at unscripted. Like we're real fun when we
Oh,
don't have a script. So this one's gonna be a
you're
gem. I
setting
can tell you right
standard.
now.
You're setting expectations like off the bat right now, and now the pressure's on. I'm gonna. Ugh.
No, I feel like anybody could go back to any one of our unscripted episodes, especially the early ones,
Mm.
and uh, and see that we are very exciting when we go off script.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you like soapboxes and train wrecks, then have we got a show for you? So,
Right.
what are we going to not talk from a script about
We do have bullet
this
points,
way? I
I
know
will say.
we do. I've added a few myself.
Okay. So
It's
tonight,
it's
yeah,
potpourri of topics, really.
they really well, but they all kind of coalesce around one topic, right?
Hmm.
We want to talk about some things that are really significant as we head into election day. We're recording this on a Sunday. This coming Tuesday is election day, midterm election day 2022. And so we've seen a few things in the last several weeks that we feel like are very important to talk about heading into the election. Um, we said it earlier, I think off camera, not that we're going to sway anybody's opinion necessarily, but if we can even help one person think about something that they wouldn't have considered going into election day, then we will have done our jobs.
Yeah, I'd like to put just like a stake in the ground before we see the results coming out. Kind of discuss some things that we're considering um, as we go into this Tuesday, and maybe if we're feeling froggy, some minor prognostication about what we can expect.
Ooh, I do like to
Maybe.
prognosticate.
Yes, not typically prognostication is a fool's game, but well, we are a couple of fools. So,
Prognosticating fools.
prognosticating fools. So this is a electoral potpourri of topics, if you will.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
going to cover things like a fun phrase that maybe not a lot of you know about called stochastic terrorism, um,
Hmm.
which will come into play. We're going to talk about some of the massive amount of election deniers that are on ballots across the country right now.
Yes.
Um, and we might touch a little bit on fiscal policy, red versus blue, depending on what the time's looking like. By the end, just some real light, a
Real light
sprinkling.
topics. Nothing serious. There's nothing serious to consider going into this election.
Mm-mm.
Nothing on the line here at
It's
all.
certainly not democracy at stake, and I know
No.
none of you have heard that phrase being used this election, um, unlike the previous 2 or 3 elections when that's been used
Yeah,
all the
no.
time.
No, nobody's even saying that. And absolutely nobody's talking about like, how much a gallon of milk costs,
Yeah, I'm
right?
actually I'm like legitimately I'm getting so tired of saying like, yeah, democracy is at stake this election and meaning it every time. Like
I'm done
I'd
with
really
that.
like it to just be hyperbole for once. Just to like motivate people to get out and not like legitimately, guys, please go vote.
Please vote. Please vote for
Yeah.
people who are going to,
Respect our
respect our
institutions.
representative republic.
Yeah. Anyway, so that kind of gets to the core
Uh,
of one of the things we're going to talk about is there are like Robin was mentioning it earlier with the gallon of milk and the price. It is there's a conflict of messaging happening right now, depending on who you're
mm-hmm.
deciding to listen to. And on one side of the political aisle, you have people talking about how, yeah, democracy is at stake, and you need to vote in order to save democracy. And on the other
Mm-hmm.
side, you have people talking about, simple things like how expensive everything is, and
Right?
and crime, and trying to make their point based on that. So, um, yeah, there's a huge disconnect between the sides and what people care about, and we're going to see here in a little under 48 hours,
Hmm.
I think at this point, we'll begin to see which one of these messagings was successful.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we talk about like the success of different messaging tools and narratives, we also have to consider kind of the polarity between the sides and how they were set up to receive these messages in the first place.
Mm.
So you've got the side that's really talking about the economy and crime and all of those kind of traditional election topics, and they're primed to be able to receive that message because at their core they don't believe what the other side is saying. They don't believe that democracy and the stability of our nation's governmental system is actually on the line, so they can ignore that line of messaging and really focus on these very practical aspects, where as if you swap it, you have an entire group of people who really do believe that the future of our country is on the line. And so there is no line of messaging that is so important on the other side that it would convince them to risk putting our democracy in a tenuous position going forward. So, whereas in like a normal election year, we would see messages competing on almost a level playing field. But here you have two different groups that are messaging only to their own groups, and they know it. And that's going to be really interesting because this will be a measure of how many people genuinely fall into those groups, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I was processing what you were thinking, or what you were thinking. I wish I were processing what you were thinking. It would make this whole job a lot easier. Uh, no, I agree. One of the frustrating things about that I've been thinking about is that some people are worried about paying the bills, buying milk, putting meat on the table, food on the table, not just meat.
Yeah.
I was thinking about meat because meat is ridiculously expensive right now on
Yes.
top of everything else. But I personally, in my own mindset, to kind of give a practical example, is like I don't worry about how much stuff costs if the system in which you buy those things could fail.
Right.
Like if the American government fails, the cost of milk is going to be much lower on the list of priorities for
Right.
a lot of Americans. Because a lot of people will suddenly find themselves, I think, fighting to even live in this country. And I don't mean like they're going to be dying, but I mean like being welcome here, being forced out of the United States, or
Hmm.
being treated as second class citizens again, and on a much more existential level, uh, beyond just life and death, but like just having a fulfilling life, struggling to live in the United States. And
Right.
that's what I worry about. We're seeing all sorts of things that are slowly chipping away on the protections that we have as citizens here. Like right now, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments about affirmative action, and
Hmm.
it's specifically there's two cases, and one of them applies to private colleges, one of them applies to public colleges. But the end result will be, I mean, it'll be likely that they'll be decided in the same way because
Yeah.
of the 6-3 split. And the end result will likely be, if I'm going to hazard a guess here, that we are going to see affirmative action as it applies to college admissions no longer be legal, if
Hmm.
you will, and we will therefore see quite the, I would guess, um, shall we say, homogenization of the collegiate population across the nation. It's going to make it harder for minorities, people with statistic
Right.
disadvantages towards success and achievement, to get into prestigious schools. So all of that is a very long and roundabout way of saying that, yeah, I worry about uh, this election. And while I do care about how much stuff costs, I the reason I focus on the problems our democracy is facing is because, um, in a really weird way, we're fortunate enough to live in a country where the cost of milk is important enough to swing an election. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It does make sense. Um, I want to acknowledge that both of us are approaching this conversation from a place of relative privilege, right?
oh, yes,
So
definitely.
we generally don't wake up every day and wonder if we're going to be able to afford to feed our families.
Yeah,
Um, and so this conversation is not to say that that does not also need to be a very important topic of conversation.
right.
Action also needs to be taken to control this cost of living crisis, to try to stabilize our economy a little bit more, things like that. We acknowledge that those things need to also take place. What we're the point with that I think we both are trying to make is that we cannot afford on any level to sacrifice the stability of our democracy for the temporary stability of the economy, because the US economy goes up and down and it changes, and we could have a bunch of politicians come in who promise to completely fix the inflation problem, and they could fix it for 2 years. They could fix it for 4 years. They could not
Make it
fix it at all.
worse.
Right. Either way, we're taking that chance. Whereas if we bet on trying to preserve the stability of our governmental system, then we have a better likelihood of having the time to find our way through in the long run. So if you are out there and you are struggling to put food on the table, I personally have been there. I understand. Um, this is a very, very difficult decision, and we don't mean in any way to trivialize that decision for you or to make it sound like it should be an easy one.
Yeah,
We just know that the state of our economy isn't guaranteed going forward, no matter who you vote for. But at least I believe that the health of our democracy is very clearly at stake based on this election.
yeah. Um, and I think the economic argument is one to, I'm going to skip around a little bit. The economic
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
argument is one that is like really frustrating to me because it ignores the way that it's being framed is that it ignores the reality of the situation, which is that the entire world is struggling with an economic crisis right now.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it's not like the inflation is just in the United States. It's
Right.
we've got inflation all across Europe. You've got it all throughout Asia and Australia, like Africa. Everybody is struggling with inflation. South America, let's just get them all in there because the pandemic, the world shut down. It created supply chain issues, which are still not
Hmm.
resolved. And now we've got an ongoing war in Ukraine. Ukraine exported 20% of the world's grain, and it can no longer do so because Russia, long story short, is not being a they're not negotiating in good faith for anything. And
Yeah.
so the 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 fact that 20% of the world's grain can't be delivered is creating a massive increase in grain prices around the world because suddenly we have much less than we should. Um, that's also compounded by ridiculous things like, for example, the fact that Russia has been putting the kibosh basically on fertilizer exports, which makes it more expensive to grow things.
Right.
And you've got OPEC, which has been uh, cutting production. You've got oil
Uh-huh.
companies, which are somehow posting record profits quarter over quarter. even though the price of a barrel of oil is at the same level as it was, what, like in, I think, 2018. Hold on a second. I'll look it up because it
Yeah.
pisses me off.
It's like way pre-pandemic,
Yeah,
like
it's.
cushy economic times price of oil.
Hold on a second because there we go. Yeah, the point being that if the price of a if the price of gas were tied to the price of a barrel of oil, we would be paying the same right now. Yeah, we're looking at like $89, $90 for a barrel right now. Um, like the last time it was at this level was 2014,
Yeah.
basically.
So that's like full swing recovery from the Great Recession. That's like everyone's doing great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next closest time for this, the last time it was even close to this, was uh, 2018, June 2018. So we should be paying similar prices, adjusting for normal inflation, but we're not. We're still paying, a ridiculous amount, almost $5 a gallon in some places or more for gas.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this inflation thing, it's not caused by Democrats, it's not caused by Biden, it's not caused by
No.
anything that any single politician or political party is doing. It's just, I believe, the economic term for this is a clusterfuck, and that is
Yeah.
like that's
I
driving
think that's what
things.
I heard Jamie Dimon say the other day. This is a cluster fuck.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. So, I mean,
That's what,
any
yeah.
appeal to reducing the cost at the table for you is not, in my opinion, being it's not being made in good faith. Like maybe we can do some things to adjust the price, but I doubt it because like things are being set on a global market. So
They are.
it sounds to me like somebody is trying to sell you what you want to hear without
Mm-hmm.
any plan to follow through on it that they can actually execute. And that's one of my other frustrations, and something that I wish people would focus on is that I haven't heard an actual plan
Right.
out of Republicans. I
No.
haven't heard a single, like, these are the steps we're going to take. Their entire message has been, we're going to change things. And it's like,
Right.
guys, you can't
Things are
copy
bad.
Obama without having some plan to back it up.
Well, and that's like it's like we always talk about with correlational versus causational data, right?
Yeah.
It's really easy to build a narrative and build a message on a correlation. Things happen at the same time. Let's make it sound like they're related. This happens every time a presidency turns over, especially in a crisis, right? President Trump took over and added a bunch of jobs to the economy after we had basically a workforce crisis. Biden took over immediately, like during the pandemic, and as we were opening things up and people were being rehired, and his administration's getting credit for all of these jobs added to the economy.
Yeah.
His administration had virtually nothing to do with that,
Yeah.
but he's getting credit for it.
Neither
At
did
the
Trump's
same time,
administration.
exactly.
Yeah.
No, like very few presidential administration decisions actually affect the number of jobs on the market at any given time, but they get credit for it. It's like a little tick in their box.
Yeah.
That we're seeing the same thing because Biden is president during a time when we're really, really struggling economically. It's easy to shift the focus to, well, he took over and things got bad or things stayed bad. He didn't
Yeah.
fix them. It's really easy to make that case because everyone says, yeah, forget him. It would be better if, or things were better in the first 2 years of Trump's presidency versus the first 2 years of Biden's presidency.
Yeah.
It's
But
easy to make those connections without addressing all of the underlying factors of those first 2 years of presidency, right? Like Trump took over at a time when we were doing really darn good
yeah.
economically. Biden took over when things were in the crapper. You
But
can only do so much.
yeah, and we don't have time to talk about all the decisions that led to where we were when Biden took over. We just don't.
We
Um,
don't. We don't today. We do
but
eventually.
yeah, I just the red versus blue economic arguments in this particular campaign without any sort of plan, yeah, big pet peeve of mine.
Big pet peeve. I will say, I feel like one thing that 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 blue politics is missing in this conversation is I don't feel like they're addressing the economic situation. They're putting so much focus on what they believe is at stake. I think from a marketing perspective, right? My job is to convince people of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're missing a significant opportunity to address the concerns of people who might be on the other side.
Oh yeah,
They're just not talking about it.
I totally agree. A lot of the messaging that I'm hearing, at least from the national, party line, has
Right.
been it's about, uh, democracy at stake and January 6th and Trump and like yeah, those are important things, but as we kind of touched on earlier, to be explicit about it, it doesn't mean that the cost of bacon and eggs doesn't matter too. And it needs to be like we can address
Right.
both at once. We can walk
Yeah.
and chew gum at the same time. There's no reason that messaging
Speak
has
for
to
yourself,
be
sir.
only there's no reason that the messaging has to stick solely to
Right.
democracy. The here's the really, I think, difficult part to express about this is that a lot of people might be thinking to themselves, maybe not so quietly, okay, but what's the big deal about democracy? Like, it's
Right.
made my life really, really hard. And
Hmm.
I would rather just be, like, a lot of people think to themselves, I would rather just have the security of being able to feed my family, having a roof over my
Yeah.
head, and being safe, being fed, being warm, than this constant stress. And that's a tale as old as the United States itself.
Yes.
Security versus freedom.
Mm-hmm. It is worth pointing out, and I think I can't remember exactly which episodes we've talked about it in, but it's worth mentioning that when you compare numbers to numbers, generally, democratic economic and fiscal policies tend to benefit the people who are struggling more than Republican economic policies. So if you are out there and you are struggling to make ends meet, especially in this economy, keep in mind that the policies and the programs that are funded and put in place under blue leadership, especially at the federal level, tend to benefit people who are in your situation a lot more than those that are put in place under red leadership. And that, again, that's something that's not really being talked about. It's something that we don't bring up very often in the national discourse.
Yeah.
I think because, like, if I was going to try to message that, right, from a platform perspective, what am I going to say? Like, hey, we're better for poor people.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
nobody wants
the
to acknowledge, like, oh, hey, that's me.
and the Republican counter to that is this really twisted message about how Democrats just want to keep you poor. Like, Democrats are trying to keep you poor, so they subsidize you and they make it so you're comfortable, down here, but you can't ever excel. I've heard that specific
Oh,
line
yeah.
multiple times, and
Oh,
it's so
yeah.
frustrating to me because it's a twisted way of thinking about it. The number of people that I personally know, now mind you, this is not a good data point, so you can't take it for applying across the board, but the number of people I personally know who have had some sort of government funded assistance and then worked their tail off to do something about it, to be better, to
Mm-hmm.
improve their lives, and used that assistance to actually make their lives better. Like, it's I mean, it's not hundreds, but it's definitely enough that I could use hands to count them, which means that
Yeah,
the programs work, at least
they do.
in some limited way. So
Especially in states, because, like, you have the federal programs and then you have how the states implement those programs, and there's all kinds of intricacies when it comes to these sort of social safety net issues. But especially in states where they are well funded and well administrated, you see that kind of graduation out of the system, and you don't see a lot of recidivism. Oh God, that word. You don't see a lot of recidivism back into the program when they are administrated well.
Yeah. Um, I think enough about financial policy.
Yeah, yeah,
um, I want to talk about, at least for a few minutes, this concept of stochastic terrorism,
yeah.
um,
Yes.
which hopefully is a phrase that is new to a lot of people, because I like
I
bringing
had to
new
Google it.
vocabulary to
It's the
people.
first word I've had to Google in a long time.
Yeah, it's really cool. Stochastic terrorism. It's not a cool thing, but it's a cool word. Uh,
It is.
it is the I'm going to just read the definition we have. The
Do it.
public demonization of a person or group resulting in the incitement of a violent act which is statistically probable but whose specifics cannot be predicted. So basically, somebody important, somebody with a microphone or a mouthpiece, just talks trash about a group or a person so much that other people go out and do something about it.
Yes. Yeah. The term stochastic is excuse me, one of my new favorite words, simply because it means that something is statistically probable but not predictable. And that's like, I don't know, that just feels, I feel seen by that particular word. Something is statistically probable but completely unpredictable. Uh yeah, that's basically that's the process. Somebody who's, charismatic, a person or an organization that carries a lot of social weight, gets out there somewhere public, says shitty things about a particularly targeted group of people or an individual. Really key to this process is that they make the case that the person or the group that they're talking about is a particular threat
Mm-hmm.
to the group of people that they're speaking to. That's really key to this, is that there's some element of a threat to your well-being, to your group of people, their stability, their safety, their security. Um, that's kind of the crux of this.
Yeah.
And they might do that versus on, I mean, historically you've seen it in like in-person speeches, in traditional news media, the newspaper, even advertising.
Oh yeah.
Now social media is where it's at.
Yeah. Twitter, truth, quote unquote, social.
Ugh.
Um, the thing is, this is something that has been, without putting too fine a point on it, this is like Trump's primary weapon is stochastic, not necessarily terrorism. It's not necessarily he's trying to invoke an attack or violence to cause political change necessarily. Um,
Right.
it is just it is it is the way he does business, though. He'll complain about something or talk about
Mm-hmm.
something until somebody does something about it. But it's very rare for him to explicitly say, you go and do this thing. He'll talk about,
Yeah.
um, I was going to say he'll talk about immigrants, and then hope that somebody does
Yeah.
something about immigrants. But then I realized that, like, that was one of the few things he actually had a plan for. Um, I mean, it was a bad plan. It was just a wall. But hey, it's something.
Well, but also that's a really great example of this kind of process, because it's like the way that stochastic terrorism works is a very specific and at least ostensibly unintentional process. You've got your charismatic speaker who says something bad, someone hears it, they're disgusted. Usually they hear the same message over and over and over again. They reach a tipping point, generally again caused by fear or anxiety about their own safety or the safety of people that they care about. And then they go out and do something terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you've got your original speaker who says, "Well, I don't condemn the violence." And we saw that exact process with the Buffalo shooting, right? We saw that exact process with the shooting at the Walmart in, is it San Antonio or El Paso? I can't remember which one
Yeah.
it was.
And the Walmart shooting where the terrorist was specifically seeking out Latinos, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
or students,
The shooting in Buffalo, the shooter was specifically seeking out African Americans.
right?
It's a
The
part of that same process. So, I mean, he's a great example of it.
Yeah, and there was the Christchurch shooting.
Hmm.
Um, there was a shooting at a synagogue. There's too many to count, but there's a shooting at a
Right,
synagogue in like 2018 where they are specifically going after Jews. Jews are a,
right.
a very frequent target of this sort
Yes,
of mentality.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and the thing is, like, once you know that it exists, right? It's it's pretty easy to identify when it is being leveraged. Pretty
Hmm.
much anytime, and again, not to put too fine a point on it, it's just that anytime Trump speaks, he's
Yeah.
feeding into that sort of somebody should do something about this. The problem is Trump especially is kind of changing the pattern there. Um,
Hmm.
because like the final part of it is that the original speaker gets to use some sort of plausible deniability, and say, no, 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 we deny in the strongest terms, we condemn in the strongest terms this sort of violence. That's not how
Hmm.
we do things. This is America. We use democracy. But Trump doesn't do that part. He doesn't take that step. Sometimes he does, but
No.
less and less now. And the prime example of that is the most recent one, I should say, is this attack on Paul Pelosi that happened
Yeah.
in on October 28th. Um, if you've somehow been living under a rock, October 28th, the husband of the U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was hospitalized after a man broke into his house and assaulted him early in the morning, like 2 a.m. On the 28th. Uh, Paul Pelosi is 82 years old and fought off a man that was attacking him with a hammer. And
Jesus.
miraculously, honestly, only had a fractured skull. Now he did have severe injuries to his right arm and hands, but like easily could have been dead.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so the thing is, there's been a lot of misinformation about this, but the man who attacked him very explicitly said that he was there for Nancy Pelosi. We know these from the police record for Nancy Pelosi. We know these from the police records. We know based on his social media presence that he has been radicalized by these people, especially on the far right, who have been saying these terrible things about how Democrats are, threatening our country or how the stealing the election, um,
Right.
and so on and so forth. And he was motivated to save, quote unquote, his country.
Hmm.
And at one
Yeah.
point, he had the opportunity to leave. He knew that Paul Pelosi had called 911, and he chose to stay, knowing that the cops were on their way, because he viewed himself as a hero, as a revolutionary, in the same way that the
Hmm.
revolutionaries who fought the British to establish the United States were heroes for America. And that's directly from the police reports. Those are quotes from the man himself. So this type of this type of terrorism is so dangerous because that's what it does. It
Yeah.
radicalizes people who become these true believer types, and because they're self-motivated, they're self-radicalized, nobody told them they had to do this, they're very, very committed to their actions, and they've convinced themselves that they got to do it, and they'll follow through with it.
Yeah. The bridge um, between this sort of this probable but unpredictable terrorism and then radicalized terrorism that we can start to watch and predict and plot. Um, it doesn't take long, and it's not a far walk to get there.
Yeah.
Um, this is it's how we see groups all over the world become radicalized. The same sort of messaging process, the same sort of threat action process.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying.
Yeah. And this is the part that scares me. Scares the wrong word. This is the part I'm most concerned about because like this attack on Paul Pelosi is far from the only act of stochastic terrorism that we've seen in recent history. August
Right.
29th of this year, Pennsylvania man pleaded guilty to threatening to shoot and kill a heretofore unnamed member of Congress. He made threats in August while on pretrial release pending sentencing for impersonating members of then President Donald Trump's family to raise funds for a fictitious political organization. Like the guy, not great. In July of this year, Republican U.S. Representative Lee Zeldin, who is a New York gubernatorial candidate, he was giving a campaign speech near Rochester in New York, and a man climbed on stage and tried to stab him. I saw that video. It's bizarre because it's like, how is this happening? Like this cannot be happening. This does not happen.
Right.
But it is, and these are not one-offs. You can just look at the attempted or actually executed acts of terrorism that are coming from this rhetoric that we're seeing right now, that is being increasing, like the heat's going up and up because nobody is saying this isn't right, or rather the people who are in charge of causing it
Right.
aren't taking that third step and saying no, I condemn this.
Right.
Trump himself needs to come out and say, no, this is bad, but he won't do it. I don't think I've seen anything from him condemning the attack on Paul Pelosi. And in fact, his son was a fucking cave troll and tweeted just a joke about it. Anybody joking about it, honestly, kind of tells you what you need to know about their morals.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, we're not going to see it. And that's the thing. I think the closest that we're going to get to a statement probably would be as disappointing as what we saw after Charlottesville, which was there are very fine people on both sides, right? He said nothing after the plot to kidnap and execute Governor Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan was completely laid bare and multiple people were arrested. Nothing.
Yeah. Well, you know why on that. We never followed up on this, but the theory, the conspiracy, by the way, is that that was actually all FBI agents. Because if it's ever something that you can't explain yourself, it's always the FBI guys. Just want
it should be. It absolutely should be.
It's freaking annoying.
I can't. That's too much.
Oh, I read one that said the Las Vegas shooting was.
Yeah, I had heard that one. Anytime that there's like a gun massacre, gun related violence like that, you always hear that it's actually the liberals trying to cause a problem so that your guns get taken away.
Yeah. The end goal was for the Vegas shooting. Apparently, according to this conspiracy theory, it was to get bump stocks banned.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, they did a real good job.
Yeah. So anyway, back to stochastic terrorism.
Yes.
Just to generalize it a little bit, here's some numbers that are not great, but kind of exemplify why this matters. If we go to Arizona, you'll remember Maricopa County, which was the center of a lot of controversy in the 2020 election, and there was the Fruit Ninjas guys who were trying to investigate the election. I don't think who was it? Something Ninjas. I'm calling them Fruit Ninjas.
I think it was like Code Ninjas or something like
that. Who said that who didn't have any experience doing this, but said they were going to certify the election and then couldn't find anything wrong, even though they were basically paid actors for the Trump campaign. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
In that county, election workers have faced more than 100 threats and intimidating communications in the run-up to Tuesday's midterms. Now, this was as of a few days ago. Most of the threats that they're receiving were based on conspiracy theories by former President Trump and his allies, like Bannon, for example. More tellingly, I think, even than that, is that according to data provided by the U.S. Capitol Police. The guys who a couple of them were killed,
Yeah.
on January
Hmm.
6th. Um,
Those guys.
they have seen threats or cases related to concerning statements and threats made to members of Congress go from 3,939 cases in 2017 to 9,625 cases in 2021. And who knows what the final total will be this year. I would be willing to bet it will be higher.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to make a quick point, though. I would not call January 6th a case of stochastic terrorism. I see it included
No.
in the list, but I don't think it qualifies because, as we can see in the communications that have been provided through the January 6th committee, and you can say what you want about the committee itself, the evidence that they're procuring, it's from the people who actually took part in it. Like, they're not making the evidence up. And that shows specific communications between parties planning an event on January 6th. So it's not that somebody was saying, man, I hope something will happen. It's that
Right.
the people directly involved in executing that plan were in communications with the people who would benefit from that plan being executed. That's just terrorism.
Yeah, that's just straight terrorism. There is none of that element of a message goes out into the world and then someone picks it up and does something about it. This used to be described as like lone wolf terrorism, um,
Yeah.
but anymore they kind of have moved away from that because the actor is not always a lone wolf, and you can't downplay the importance of the message that they receive in the first place. But yeah, that's just straight organized terrorism, just
Yeah.
insurrection, just as that's all it is.
Yeah. And we stand to see things like that again in the wake of this election, depending on who wins.
Mm-hmm.
60% of Americans voting by Tuesday will have on the ballot a candidate that refuses to accept the results of the 2020 presidential election as being valid. 60%
Yeah,
of people, 60%.
Yep,
Yeah.
I've got, I've got them, and it's a little shocking. I mean, so from 538 Politics, which is a website that we refer to a lot during election times, um, admittedly, on many of the media bias charts, they do lean slightly left, but they have a lot of really accurate statistical modeling and really good representation of candidates that are on the ballot and the way that things are looking running up to election day. They do a lot of really great polling that is very statistically valid. So we will acknowledge that they do have a slight left-leaning bias, but their numbers check out, essentially. And so out of 552 total Republican nominees running for office this month, they found that 199 of them fully deny the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Like, these candidates either clearly state that the election was stolen from Trump, or they took legal action to try to overturn the results, like voting to not certify the election results or joining in lawsuits that were trying to overturn the election results.
Some of them took illegal action to
Yeah,
overturn. Some
exactly.
of them were actually at the Capitol on January 6th.
Yes. Yes. And some of them were part of, you know, conspiracies to send alternate electors and all kinds of things that are just downright illegal. But looking at legal action, they did that too. In the House, a lot of these election deniers are poised to win their elections. They're going to win their races. 116 election deniers and 8 election doubters, which the definitions of those two things you can find on 538, have at least a 95% chance of winning their race. That's
So
116
nerve-wracking.
to 124 people in the U.S. House of Representatives who believe that the previous presidential election was illegitimate.
Or at the very least, express those thoughts out loud, even if they don't believe them personally.
Correct.
Which
Correct.
I'm cynical enough to believe that a lot of these people actually think that there was nothing wrong with the election, but they know that they can use that as a campaign platform,
Right.
in the absence of having an actual plan and get a
True.
significant vote.
Right. I don't know if that's cynical or optimistic.
It's both. It's both. You can be both. I'm a
Yeah.
cynical optimist.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I don't think it's optimistic, honestly. I think it's pessimistic because it just shows that they're so obsessed with obtaining the power that they don't care how they do it.
That's true.
So
I guess my hope would be like if they don't really believe it, then maybe they would be, if push came to shove, they would be less likely to take um policy action. Maybe. I don't know. I tend to just lean toward the heavy optimist. That's just me.
we've been doing this for over 2 years now. You're adorable.
I know. I
Uh,
know.
at the state level, at least 2 election deniers and 4 election doubters are poised to be inaugurated as governors next year. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. That can have a
It's a
direct
big deal.
impact on like how an election is executed in a state.
Mm-hmm.
There are 7 election deniers running for attorney general, so potentially 7 attorneys general who could be, and 7 for secretary of state. Secretary of state, it's a post that oversees election administration in most states.
Yeah.
Fewer states than it was in 2020 because after 2020, some governors removed that responsibility from the secretaries of state, Georgia,
They did.
because the secretaries of state didn't do what the governor wanted and fake the election
Oh,
results.
yep. Which, oh, Georgia's a big hot mess. So again, like why is this a big deal? Why do we care about governors in states that are not ours? Why do we care about secretaries of state in states that are not ours? It all goes to the integrity of future elections, to protecting the process by which the United States has chosen its government, its leaders for 250 plus years. If there are a significant number of officials in office at both the federal and the state level who deny the legitimacy of the 2020 election, which, again, by all rational indicators, was one of the most secure elections in recent history, then that leaves the door open for drastic policy changes that restrict access to voting on an even greater level than we saw immediately post-election, which that was significant. We saw so much restriction of access to voting and the ability to cast a vote. I know here in Missouri where I'm voting, I have to have a photo ID on Tuesday when I go to vote. That was a decision that was made immediately post-election and is now being implemented. And we're going to see that if these election deniers take office, we're going to see that increase significantly. And they'll have the power to do it.
Yeah. Which, don't get us wrong, there's nothing that's inherently bad about requiring an ID to vote. It's when the requirements for an ID to vote are combined with an incredible amount of obstacles to
Right.
get that ID that it becomes problematic. You have to consider people who can vote still, but maybe aren't free to go to the DMV during its normal operating hours to get a driver's license, or
Yeah.
who can't move themselves and the person who can move them is not available, or so on and so forth, right? So
Right. Many states still require you to pay for a non-driver's license for a photo ID. So there's that obstacle as well.
which just makes it effectively a second order poll tax, which poll taxes are illegal, they're unconstitutional. But
Mm-hmm.
if you have to pay for your license and you have to have a license to vote, you're just moving the burden from the vote to the license, and suddenly people aren't paying to vote, they're paying for the license. And it's
Right.
easier to defend in a court that wants to find a way to allow that to continue to happen. So if you challenge it up to a 6-3 Supreme Court that is leaning towards the side that would want to restrict voter turnout, well,
Exactly.
anyway.
The more obstacles you put in the way of somebody who should otherwise legally be free and open to vote, the harder you make it to really see the will of the people executed.
Yeah, it makes democracy farther away for all of us. Yeah. And then these officials that we worry about, the reason this is a big deal, you'll recall talk of certifying an election in 2020. At a state level, those are the officials who certify that election are the governors and the secretaries of state. And if they won't believe the results of an election, that is a threat to that will bring the democratic process to a grinding halt. If they refuse to act in good faith, then we will honestly, I truly believe, we will be wishing for a time when we are concerned about the price of milk over everything else again.
Yeah, agreed.
If you want to tell us how concerned you are about democracy, you can do that at firesidebreakdowns.com. We have all sorts of great stuff there for you. You can see our show notes to almost every single one of our shows, even some show notes for our unscripted episodes sometimes. If you want to check our sources, go. That's what they're there for. You can also find links to all of our socials. So you can find us on Twitter, sort of, on Instagram, more likely, even on Facebook, until it chokes off its final breath and finally dies. We'll be on whatever social media giant takes over after Meta kicks the bucket, eventually. We will also direct you to our Patreon, which you can find the link to on our website. If you think that we deserve some, money to buy some coffees or something for doing this, that's the place where you can throw it our way. Patreon subscribers get a little extra content every week. Sometimes it's just a few minutes. Sometimes it's a full 15 minutes of additional research that we couldn't cram into these episodes. And you'll also get occasional inside thoughts. We're going to have a happy hour. We've been saying that for forever. We were supposed to have it in October, but then I decided to bring my life crashing down around my ears. So we didn't do it yet. We're getting there.
We didn't do it yet. It's okay. We do have playlists. We have playlists.
We do have playlists as well. If you want to listen to what we listen to when we're writing these things, that's the place to go get it. Patreon.
Yeah. Patreon. That's the thing.
That's my bump. That's my thing. Do you have good news?
I do have good news.
Hit me with
I'm stealing it directly from So Informed, who stole it directly from alaskapublic.org. But it is both relevant to the topic and to the fact that it is National Native American Heritage Month.
Woo! It's one of our favorite months here at Fireside Breakdown. We have failed to celebrate appropriately so far, and that is on us.
We're working on it, though. We're working on it. Okay, so a group of regional tribes is encouraging local communities to turn out in the 2022 midterm elections with cash prizes for schools and cultural programs in Alaska.
Dope.
Via alaskapublic.org. A total of $20,000 will go to Bristol Bay communities with high turnout in next week's election. If a winning community doesn't have a school, the money will be given to its tribe to support a cultural program. The contest is not affiliated with any candidate or political party. Instead, it's just about getting people to exercise their right to vote. Get out there, cast a vote. That's all that matters. There are two contest categories. One is for the higher voter turnout overall, and the other is for the biggest increase in turnout compared to the 2018 midterm elections. So that's really cool. I learned in this last week that there are a whole lot of rules around how you can incentivize people to vote. I didn't know them, but this is one cool way to do it. You're not directly incentivizing an individual, but you are letting them know that their civic participation can benefit their local community, and that is awesome. Historically, Native American voters don't have the highest turnout rates. Can't imagine why.
Yeah,
They've
it's not
been
like there's a
isolated
billion
and
obstacles.
alienated from, citizenship in the United States for most of their history. So I can't imagine why they wouldn't be the most excited about participation. But they are highly valued, and their perspective is really important. And it is really, really valuable to see tribal communities coming out to make their voices heard in what happens in the United States. So it's super exciting.
I agree. I am stoked to hear that. I learned that there were a lot of rules around election incentivization from Hank Green, who was going to host a lottery for
Yes.
people who had registered to vote based on his Twitter replies, and almost ended up going to federal prison for it. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's great. If you're an Instagram person, or I think he's also on TikTok, I'm too old for that. Um Hank Green is a great follow
yeah,
on the Instagrams. He's
yeah,
super fun, and you learn cool things like you can't pay people to register to vote.
yeah, yeah. Fun guy.
Fun guy.
Anyway, that's all we've got for this week. Coming in right on the nose there. And so, thank you so much, everybody, for listening to us one more time, for having patience with us while we get our lives figured out. We will hopefully be back to you 1 week from today. Go vote for the love of God. Get your friends
Yes.
to vote. Get their friends to vote. And until we talk to you again, take care of each other.